Free your mind.
How is African Union?
The Pan-African Pyramid, Andrew Katsabe, your speaker, in Kasese, I'm now in Kasese, in Busongora Kingdom. Busongora Kingdom, and I am seated next to the King of Busongora, His Majesty Ndahura King Kashagama. King Kashagama is actually a recipient of the Pan-African Pyramid Global Award. He's a Pan-African, but he's also a senior journalist. He's a veteran journalist who even worked in Canada, in a Canadian media, before he relocated back to Uganda and finally in his kingdom in Kasese, Busongora. When they say Kasese, it confuses you. It should be Busongora.
It is Busongora because Kasese is just a town in Busongora. There are many other places.
Kasese is a town in Busongora. So Kasese is in Busongora Kingdom.
Kasese is in Busongora County. Busongora County is in Busongora Kingdom.
Hey.
So,
anyway, Umkama Kasagama. Ndahura. I came and found you in a discussion about the African Union. Let's talk about African Union.
Before we go to African Union, I was telling you about the titles.
The titles, yes.
You know, if you are going to be a Pan-Africanist, anybody wants to be a Pan-Africanist, they should know something about African tradition and care about it. Because what are you preserving
when you don't know?
If you don't know what it is, you know, you don't care about the traditions of Africa. You don't care about the thought processes that led us to have this culture and to be different from the rest of the world. And yet you say people want to be Pan-Africanist, but they don't understand or care for the traditions and customs and heritage that they are proud to talk about, but they don't know what it does. So anyway, the procedure for naming things is you have your personal names, which are given to you by your parents when you're young. And when you become a traditional leader or king or monarch or queen, you then take a regnal name, the name that you will be known, your reign will be known for. And the problem is people don't use these protocols. They don't even name they don't follow the proper procedure for adding these names. For instance, I'll give you an example. The neighboring kingdom called Toro has a king called Rukidi IV. But everybody keeps referring to him as King Oyo. But his king, Rukidi IV, Oyo.
Oyo is his
personal name, yeah.
That's his personal.
That's his personal
name.
But the kingdom is led by Rukidi IV. The fourth.
It means there was the third.
His grandfather was Rukidi III, and there was another Rukidi before him, Rukidi II, and there was a person who was Rukidi before he wasn't the first when he was king. But after the second person came, then in order to distinguish between one Rukidi and the next, we give them numbers. And so usually the person who is the first with the name doesn't refer to themselves as the first because they don't know. So when I'll give you an example of Europe, you have Queen Elizabeth II now, and she's named Queen Elizabeth II because there was a Queen Elizabeth before her. Now that Queen Elizabeth, when she was queen, she was the first person named Elizabeth who was queen. She never referred to herself as Elizabeth I. She was just Queen Elizabeth. Then, in 1952, when a new Elizabeth was picked, they had to start naming the other one Elizabeth I in order to distinguish
this one as the second.
Between yes and the second. So the numbers came later. If there's another Elizabeth in the future, that will be known as the third. You see, so the same thing. There's a Rukidi IV. Now for me, I'm Ndahura II, which means
there was the first.
There was another Ndahura before.
Who was the first?
Who was Ndahura? He was not the first king of Busongora. Not even. He was just in the middle. Number 5 something.
No, but that name.
That name has been used only. This is the second time.
You are the second.
Exactly.
In other words, it shows that you are taking over from somebody. You are the second. It means there was the first.
No, well, the thing is this: I am the 48th king of Busongora.
Yes, that's okay. But what I mean is,
but I'm the second king with the name
Ndahura.
Yes.
That's what I mean. That those are your ancestors.
Yes.
You're taking over from them.
Yes.
And you are carrying on.
So you choose a name that one of the kings who inspires you, or who's related to you somehow, then you say that is what? That is the name I choose. The popes do the same thing. Like Pope Francis wasn't Francis, he was something else. Pope John Paul was not John Paul, he was whatever, Ratzinger.
Ratzinger.
So, but you know, he's Pope John Paul II Ratzinger. So, and the same thing with Buganda's Mutebi. He's Mutebi II. But people refer to him as King Ronald, which is it's a crime, you know. He's not Ronald. He's King Mutebi II.
You can add others.
Yeah, you can add after. Yeah,
when you want.
Yes.
But the first one.
The first one is that he's the way you identify is to just go by the names of the kings. There was a King Mutebi the first some time back, and then there was other kings and other kings and other kings, and then there was Mutesa.
Mutesa one.
Mutesa one. Then there was another one, Chiwewa. Then there was Mwanga. Then there was this, and then finally gave birth to Daudi Chua, who gave birth to Mutesa II. Who gave birth to Mutebi II.
Mutebi II now. The reigning.
Not Ronald.
Not Ronald.
No. Not Ronald. Not Magulu Nyondo. Not any of those things. Mutebi II. Those are epithets, not even names.
Vikubyo.
Yes,
you call them Vikubyo.
There's a Vikubyo, and then there's what they call a Nyimba.
Songs.
In Luganda it's songs, but in Lusongora a Nyimba is a praise name.
Oyo Nyimba. Kabambi Guru.
No, now they call the man Oyo Nyimba. Nyimba is not his name. It's not even a name.
Hey.
It is like
Chukubyo.
No, not even a Chukubyo.
It's a praise.
It is like, say, like, for instance, I come to you and let's say you are the king now of say, Toro. And you have chosen a regional name. I don't know which name you like, let's say. Let's say you call yourself Kaboyo now, let's say the third or the fourth. Right? So somebody comes to your palace and he says, Hanjiriza, long live.
Hanjiriza
Agutamba.
Kabumba.
No, then he says your name. He says, Hanjiriza, Omukama, Kaboyo. Then he says, now he's announcing to the public, Enyimba za Kaboyo. The praise names of Kaboyo, I'm going to say them now. You announce Enyimba. It's an announcement that what follows now is no longer the greeting, it is now you reciting the praise names. Then you start Rukirabaseija, those kinds. Those are Enyimba.
Hey, Mpologoma ya Buganda.
Yes.
Entale ya Toro.
Yes, those are the Enyimba. They are not the name. The word Enyimba doesn't. But the king of Rukiri, the fourth of Toro, is frequently referred to as praising. The word Nyimba is Oyo Nyimba, which is a joke. I don't know why.
Oyo Nyimba, Kabamba Iguru.
No.
Kabamba Iguru is also a praise name. Like
before you say the praise name, you announce that you're going to say the praise name. The way you make the announcement, you say Enyimba.
Culture is very hard, my friend.
It is easy and it is interesting. So that's the problem with us, that people just mix things.
So for you, the correct naming is
Ndahura the second.
Omukama
Ndahura the
second.
Kashagama.
Hata no yongera by'urukwenda.
Yes. Then Enyimba zanje can be Imara, Ruguvu, Manya.
Imara means Zamani.
Imara.
Power.
No, Imara in Swahili, but it just means a stronghold, the last place of defense. The Hakuruka, Hakumara. It is also the word for heaven in Songora.
Heaven?
Yeah.
Imara?
Yeah. It is also another name for, for praise name for God. You say that Neemara, it is sufficient. Imara is sufficiency.
All right. I'm with King Ndahura II. Kashagama. I'm in Busongora Kingdom, and he's the king of Busongora. Now, for me, I know you more as a comrade in Pan-Africanism. What brings me this long from Kampala to here is us talk about Pan-Africanism and the future of African Union. Actually, many people think AU should be disbanded. And when I was talking to you off camera, you said we should not disband, but we should find solutions around it to solve what looks to be a problem. Let me hear you.
Well, first thing is that I just have a question, if I can ask. Like,
I am the one who has come to ask.
I know, but
now because I'm in your kingdom, you want to ask.
Now I'm shocked. Let's say you disband it. Tomorrow in the morning, we wake up and say the African Union is not there. What do you have in its place?
We
go back to before the genocide.
No, you see, King, when there is something here, and we think that it is those responsible of solving our problems, as to why it was established, and it does not. It in a way blocks other ideas of forming something else that can solve the problem. Let me give an example. You are here now, you are the king of Songora. If you simply sit here and start posturing I'm the king of Songora, but you don't solve the problems of your Songora, you are blocking other potential kings from emerging and solving the people's problems.
Then you remove me, you don't remove the kingdom. You go after the head of the AU Commission or the head of the Assembly of Heads of State and Government, or the head of NEPAD, or the head of the Pan-African Parliament. Remove them. But don't remove the AU. The AU. It's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. If the president of Russia, Putin, had decided to invade Ukraine without permission, there was no resolution by the Duma, the Parliament of Russia, and he decides to commit a crime and kidnap children or bomb civilians, do you abolish Russia or do you abolish Putin?
You abolish Putin?
Yes, because Russia is bigger than Putin. And the African Union is bigger than even the organs that are in it. And if the organs are misfunctioning, you fire them, or you remove them, or you change them, but you remove the individuals. The African Union is not an entity that works without people. So, you know, but the thing is this, anybody who has ever registered an NGO or even a company, you know how complicated it is. And that it can fail. Now imagine somehow being able to convince a whole bunch of countries and their leaders to all sign a document called the Union the Union Act in 2000 in the year what was it 1990 what
the Union Act
98
and final
something like that. But imagine how the confluence of danger and crisis that fomented and hardened these people and panicked them into signing the creation of the African Union after 40, 50, 60 years of struggling with the OAU and the African Economic Community, and they merged them. You know, they had a conference in South Africa of 200 members of parliament from all across Africa who created this framework. Very unlikely situation. Okay, the people who did this are elders who now died, many of them, and then they set this thing up, and then you come and say everything that was accomplished by Haile Selassie, Kwame Nkrumah, Leopold Senghor, and Mandela, and everybody, well, now it's not working properly, let's abolish it. Like, who does that? And the thing is, once you abolish it, do you think you can pull together a conference and replace it if you don't have the idea now of what should work better? And the thing is that there's a saying, the perfect is the enemy of the good. You have an idea of what is perfect, but you cannot execute the perfect thing. And then you have something that is working. It's not perfect, it is good, but it's not perfect. And then you say, let me destroy the good thing, and then I'll create the perfect one, and then you still fail. And you have neither now. You don't have the perfect one, you don't have the good one either. Okay. Like, for instance, there's another example I want to give. In 1963, when the OAU sat down for the first time, the main argument at that point was these borders of Africa were created illegally, which is true. They were illegal borders. And they created a balkanized African society where we had ended up with 50 states at that time.
Now we are 54 today?
Well, 55.
Today we are 55.
55, and we're probably going to end up with more at some point. The question is, they made a decision and said, look, if we try to rectify the borders, we will end up fighting each other for a long time because borders cannot be resolved. One say will say, you move this village here. They say half the village now needs to go back this, and then a quarter of the village should not have been included in that deal, you know. And what happens is people end up killing each other. And so they said, you know what? Regardless of the errors, mistakes, and illegalities involved in creating the borders. In fact, there was even no border properly documented between Uganda and Kenya at the time. Because there was a two-man commission in Britain that had drafted, but they never said it was a border of
Just
Uganda
two
and Kenya. Two people, a two-man commission, allegedly. Or people who had never come to Africa. They told them, draw a border of Kenya and Uganda, and it was not even a border, it is something bizarre. That's what I mean, Latchton to say wanted to invade.
Hey.
And then Tanzania had the same problem.
Now they want the Migingo Islands and so on.
Exactly. You see this? So they always said, you know what? If we go into that stuff, we will never come out. So they said, let's pass a resolution to freeze the borders as they are. Not because we like them, not because they are good. No, they are bad.
For the sake of peace.
To avoid something worse, which is war. So in that event, the bad is better than the worse. So the African Union has 55 states which were created illegally, unfairly, but basing on the OAU resolution, we do not refuse them. We've accepted them and said, oh, there's such a thing like Uganda, even though it came out of madness of the British, who made a border like the border between Uganda and Kenya and Congo, Free State, was based on we want to put the mountain has to be in the British sphere, and so they put half the mountain, Rwenzori Mountain in Uganda, half the mountain in Congo. They never asked anybody on the mountain where they thought it was normal. Now everybody on the other side speaks French, everybody on this side speaks English, and they have borders. And if somebody crosses from there, we arrest them for trespassing, for illegal entry.
Illegal entry.
Yeah.
Yet actually they're the same.
The mother is here, the father is on the other side. Kenya's situation is the same, worse even. We have a situation where a family, they are worries. One was vice president in Kenya, the other was a minister, who was a presidential candidate here.
A minister, Agrawari.
Both of them. One is a minister in Kenya.
Agramodi.
Modi Awori and Agro Awori.
Yes.
So the thing is, the border says that one is Uganda and the other is not. But are you
Agrawari to go to Uganda, to Kenya, he needed the clearance from the border.
Yes, from his brother.
Yet he is going home.
Yes. So the issue is, where do you... The Luos in Kisumu and Kakamega were in Uganda until 1914. And the Pokot as well. And the Turkana. Lake Turkana was half in Uganda, half in Kenya. Then somebody decided, oh, let's put all of it in Kenya.
Hey.
Yes. So now, should I go and invade Kenya and say, you know what, we need Lake Turkana to be part in Uganda?
But two people sat
in England whose names are unknown to us, who did not know who we were.
Two people like this?
Two young men, most likely.
They decided that Uganda should pass here?
They made that border. They never asked your grandfather or my grandfather or nobody was asked. So you can imagine, if you decide and say, let us invade our brothers in Kenya, because they are Kenyan allegedly, and you're Ugandan, it is madness.
No, actually, that's why.
So that's why we have the African Union anyway.
Yes, but
it is to try and resolve those disputes and give us time. Now you have peace. You can use this peace to think up of a better system.
But you see,
use the road that has already been built. Don't say this road is going up and sideways instead of let me abolish the road, but you haven't built another one. So you take African Union as the road that we must use to arrive at a destination. It is not the destination itself. Yeah, the destination is one Africa, one voice, one people. Yes. So we need a single currency. We need a single armed forces.
And that's why I was taking you.
Yes.
That's why I was taking you, because
yes,
but
abolition, we do things in phases. First you have the All Africa Conference, right? in I think it was Ghana in 1950 something. And that is what we went with the conference. Before that was the Pan-African Congress.
1963 Ghana.
Before the OAU. There was other conferences that were negotiating how we can make one Africa. And so the thing is that has happened, and they took the next step and created the Organization of African Unity. Some refused. Oh no, we cannot go and have a single Africa because we need to have steps. But they created the OAU. The OAU lasted. Then in the 1980s, they came up with a theory and said, you know what, we need to have an African Economic Commission. Those who did not understand what the OAU was about.
Organization of African Unity.
Organization of African Unity was existing, and somebody went and they pushed it to create a resolution saying that there's just going to be an African Economic Community. The EAC had a plan to unify Africa in 40 years after 1980, so they was thinking 40 years after 1980s, now, 2020. But in the meantime, the genocide intervened in Rwanda. 1994. Which then forced Africans in the OAU to say, you know what, the clause in the African OAU Charter, which says that you cannot interfere in the internal affairs of another country, has resulted in the death of people. Because instead of us sending troops, we wait for the UN. Because we can't interfere. If our brothers are killing themselves there, you have to wait for the UN.
Report to UN.
Yeah, which is wrong. So then they said, you know what, we have to remove this clause. But in removing it, they ended the OAU and renamed the new structure African Union. The main thing about the African Union that's different from the OAU is that it can interfere in your internal affairs.
It can intervene?
Yes. If you start killing people in the street and committing genocide, the AU doesn't have to wait for anybody in order to send peacekeepers. They don't even have to wait for you to request. Before you used to have to call them and say, I am requesting officially. No. They just have to perceive there's a problem and they can send, in theory at least.
But then if that's the case, my senior elder, why were they waiting for America to intervene in Libya?
They did not wait.
What happened? What was AU's intervention in Libya?
No, the thing is this, that they tried to mediate, and Thabo Mbeki actually, I think, flew there. But the problem is that Obama and the so-called NATO countries did not want the African Union to intervene. They rushed to try and preempt our intervention for the simple reason it was a big prize for oil.
For Americans?
Not just Americans. Remember that in the year prior to his being removed, Gaddafi had made peace talks with NATO and with all the other countries that had been harassing them for a long time. And then there was an international delegation that went there, because even the Prime Minister of Canada went there and others. And they were negotiating for oil. And Gaddafi released oil, gave them oil. And what is ironic is that the fuel that was used by the jets that were flying off the bases in Italy to strike at Libya were also being fueled by Libyan fuel he had given them. So he didn't know where his interests lay when he was doing all that. And remember, the African Union had had a summit prior, and they had organized to have Africa have a single currency and unify more closely.
And that was being championed mainly by Gaddafi?
No, Gaddafi and our President Museveni raised objections. So the other heads of state said, okay, fine, we're going to form a two-man committee to study your concerns. And the two-man committee was Gaddafi and Museveni. And Gaddafi, before reporting back, died. And the president of Uganda still has a debt to the Africans, the African Union.
He has not yet made a report?
No.
But comrade, my senior...
So the issue for me is this, right? Instead of condemning these things and saying this is failed, remember everybody is human. But you cannot be I cannot be in Kampala every day, and you cannot be in Kasese every day. It is hard even for us to arrange this interview. And it doesn't come every often, so it is lucky. Now imagine having to convene the leaders of Africa and getting all of them and their cabinets and their parliaments and their populations to have an idea about how we have to proceed. There was about 20 years ago a meeting in Kampala to deal with the introduction of the single African currency. It was in Kampala. What has happened to that? Nothing. No follow-up. On paper it's there. The OAU and the African Union. The OAU, the last time they had a meeting of the African Chiefs of Defense Staff, the leaders of all of Africa's armies used to have a council that they sit together before decisions are made. Now they don't. As a result of failing to do that, now we're having coups everywhere. You see? And the people in the coup are saying, we're not going to be part of ECOWAS. We don't want to be part of the African. We don't want to be part of this. And they don't understand. These are young men who were born most likely after the African Union was created. They're all in their 20s and 30s and 40s. And they don't know what they're doing.
Traore.
How old is Traore? I don't know.
30-something.
Yeah, so 30-something. He was born in the 90s. Is it 80s? Late 80s. But the thing is, even if he was born yesterday, if he had interest in Pan-Africanism, he would be mentioning something about that. But his fight is with France. And that's all he's talking about.
His fight is a Pan-African fight.
No, we have to be careful what we mean by Pan-Africanism. If you're concerned
wants
about
the resources of his country
to be used by the people in his country.
The people must be the beneficiaries.
Yeah, but the people, he's talking regarding the local issues there. If I'm in Busongora and I say I want Busongora's resources to be used by Busongora, that doesn't make me a Pan-Africanist. It makes me a rational person who is concerned about local politics. But he needs to come out and say, clearly, I support African unity.
He has said that several times. He is in support of one Africa, one as a country.
Then he needs to give the African Union some respect. But they all packed on the planes and went to Russia. And actually, before going to Russia, they went to Ukraine to ask a country that was under attack to give them grain, as if there's no grain in Africa. Then they went to Putin and said, I want you to give us other things. These people are at war. We should be helping both sides to settle. And instead, everybody's going for photo opportunities.
Which people went there?
My God, there were several African heads of state, including the current president of South Africa. Ramaphosa, yes.
He's the one actually who was the head of the delegation.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that is, Traore did not go. Traore wasn't part.
Traore went and saw Putin. He has pictures with Putin.
That was a private arrangement.
Yeah, but how is that Pan-Africanist? What is
no?
Putin is a Pan-Africanist.
No, you see, when you go out of Africa to go to Russia and so on, to mobilize for Africa, it is also a Pan-African move.
Yeah, but
because you know that Africa is not an island that you're going to deal with.
But the thing, I understand that. But you know, he needs, if he went to mobilize for Africa, he should have said, I've come to mobilize for Africa. But he went there, and then the following months, they sent more of the mercenary group, the Wagners. The Wagner group went went there to allegedly defend him. So you know what, we're dealing with mercenaries here, we're dealing with rogue heads of state in Russia and other things. And by the way, am I even allowed to comment about foreign affairs? I don't know. I don't want to confuse things. But my sense is that if you have a pulpit, a microphone, and you're the head of state of an African state, you need to articulate very clearly the positions that are in support of the African Union, or if you have a better idea of how the African Union can then take the next step to progress towards African unity in its full bloom and expression, then you need to state it very clearly what it is you want us to do. But before he went to Putin, he could have gone to the Pan-African Parliament. You see? He could have gone to see other African heads of state and called them and said, this is what my problem is. He could have gone to the African Union in front of the podium and said, look, I have an issue like this. Okay. So Putin is not the Pope of Africa who decides how we proceed.
I agree with you. Now, my elder senior,
although, you know, this is the problem with the international politics. Like, the conditions that led to their fight, I don't know. It's also the same argument. They are saying they want to unify Russia, but the way they have gone about it, I don't understand, you know.
I agree with you. I hear you. Now, for me, my argument before I went into the geopolitics of Russia and so on was still on the mandate
of the African Union.
Of the African Union. A senior comrade, when Libya was under attack, these African presidents took a plane, all of them in one plane. They were going to Libya, and NATO stopped them and said don't go, and they also accepted. So if we had a NATO...
The problem is this.
If we had a NATO, an AU, an AU that was vibrant and active.
You know, the African Union is not one person. It is me and you deciding something. The problem is this. The person they were going to defend was already problematic.
Problematic to who, comrade?
Let me explain. Gaddafi did not attend an Africa or AU meeting for 22 years before the formation of the African Union. After it was formed, he had an irrational way of going about it. He went and said he's speaking for the traditional leaders, declared himself leader of king of Africa now, not even the head of state or president or whatever. Then he said he wants to move the capital of the African Union to Sirte, not even to Tripoli. Then he is going on roads throwing money out the window. He doesn't have a parliament, never had one for a long time, ever since he became president of Libya. Right? So the thing is this, that if you have a person who doesn't follow due process, and if there's no due process, he doesn't even follow the required steps that a reasonable person should follow in order to accomplish something. Okay. But he's a person who is under stress of a special type and is making erratic steps and movements. Like, for instance, I'll give you an example. When the UN and NATO were going after Iraq, after Saddam Hussein, he sent his 22-year-old daughter at that time as the chief mediator. Gaddafi. Which now leads me to question, of all the African resource that he could draw from of personnel who knew how to negotiate, or anybody else around the world. You know, Aisha is a very brilliant person, but at 22 years old, does it give you confidence that that is the best way to approach? She didn't go with any high-profile person. You know, she could have gone with Kofi Annan. I don't know. But the thing is this, that if you do things in a way that does not inspire confidence, and then you go and abuse your own people and call them rats, and then you start bombing them, and NATO comes after you, and then you have to go negotiate. They're doing so half-heartedly because they don't understand what this person is doing. They're saying they're all elected, but for him he's a dictator forever. There was not even a pretense of elections in Libya. You understand?
Just like there is no pretense of an election in UK and UAE.
Then state it. Then you go and say that the Libyan constitution says that we have a president for life, or the king of Libya called Gaddafi. He had removed King Farouk, he became King Gaddafi. That's fine. Be King Gaddafi, put together a parliament, let them elect a prime minister, then you proceed as king. Nobody's going to have an election with you. Now imagine somehow being able to convince a whole bunch of countries and their leaders to all sign a document called the Union the Union Act in 2000 in the year what was it, 1990 what?
The Union Act.
Yeah, 98. Something like that. But imagine how. The confluence of danger and crisis that fomented and hardened these people and panicked them into signing the creation of the African Union after 40, 50, 60 years of struggling with the OAU and the African Economic Community, and they merged them. You know, they had a conference in South Africa of 200 members of parliament from all across Africa who created this framework. Very unlikely situation. Okay. Okay, the people who did this are elders who've now died, many of them, and then they set this thing up. And then you come and say, everything that was accomplished by Haile Selassie, Kwame Nkrumah, Leopold Senghor, and Mandela, and everybody, well, now it's not working properly, let's abolish it. Like, who does that? And the thing is, once you abolish it, do you think you can pull together a conference and replace it if you don't have the idea now of what should work better? And the thing is that there's a saying, the perfect is the enemy of the good. You have an idea of what is perfect, but you cannot execute the perfect thing. And then you have something that is working. It's not perfect, it is good, but it's not perfect. And you say, let me destroy the good thing, and then I'll create the perfect one, and then you still fail. And you have neither now. You don't have the perfect one, you don't have the good one either. So the first place where the head of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, went was Africa. He went to Tanzania, he asked for help. He went to other African states, asked for help. And these countries had just got independence. Remember, Tanzania was only 2 years old. But they gave money. And they helped Singapore. And then Israel also got involved. They helped train Singaporean army. And then the US also helped, gave Singapore a base to fly their jets in, I think it was Montana or someplace, because Singapore is too small to fly a jet on top of that island. Yes.
It's too small to fly a fighter jet?
Yes, the airport was as long as the whole country. It's a small island. It has only grown because they put rocks in the ocean and then they build more land.
Hey, Singapore?
Yes.
In order to expand, they had to put rocks
They reclaim the ocean. Every year they add more rocks. They get rocks from some other people and they come and they pour them in the ocean. And then they put pylons of concrete and
Singapore?
Steel. Yeah, and then they build
as powerful as it is.
That's why it's powerful. They are expanding. It has now grown, I think, almost double the original land that it was on.
Hey.
It's very small. It is smaller than Busongora.
Hey, the kingdom of Busongora?
Yes, it's much, much larger than Singapore.
Hey.
So, look, every country, China itself, the person who used to write when they overthrew the Qing dynasty, the last emperor Puyi, and Sun Yat-sen became, there was Li Yuan who became the president, tried to make himself emperor. They refused, people rioted. Then the president became Sun Yat-sen. But the person who was writing the newspaper at the time, the main newspaper in China that was influencing all these movements, was a black man from Trinidad, an African.
Trinidad and Tobago?
Yes, a Pan-Africanist too, called Eugene Chen. Right? So there is no country that has no need of other interfering people, and people come and help, and others try to stop you. But we live in a world where everybody interferes with everybody else. It's not just the white people interfering with Africans, it's Africa interfering with Europe and China and everywhere else also. Africans are also the same.
We also interfere with...
Yes, we go there and we put our demands, and we have helped. Remember that the civil rights movement in Africa, like for instance the bus boycott they did in Montgomery, was copied from South Africa. You know that? From the anti-apartheid movement. Right. And you know that the right wing in America that's anti-African also had relationships with apartheid South Africa. Right. And when Mandela was going to become president, the South Africans removed the nuclear weapons that they had created in South Africa, which had been given to them to destroy the rest of Africa. So you know what? We're in a global world that functions globally and has always functioned globally, so we have to think globally. You cannot do something in Kasese and not expect that somebody in a different country, in a different continent, might have a stake in what you're doing or an interest. Yes. It's not abnormal. It is expected and it's normal. And so the thing is this. China came and helped Africa build a headquarters. Okay. Now, the original headquarters of the OAU, who built that?
The original headquarters?
Yes. Do you know that Africans built it? They did not also. The money was from the UN. Because there was a 23-year-old young man who was called Romeo Horton, a Liberian, who had gone to school in the US, and so had an understanding of how, and he had gone from a family that was involved in administration in Atlanta and other parts of the US. And so he then devised a request, and he said, we need to set up the African Development Bank. ADB, and we need to set up the UNECA, United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, and the rules of how it would run. And the Economic Commission for Africa has always been Addis and has helped, and the African Development Bank has paid a lot of grants, including the growth of South Africa's economy. Now, the money, the original core money, the funding that was being used by the African Development Bank, that came from the Nigerian Trust Fund, which is the Nigerian government. They put together a fund that was used to fund the independence and development of the rest of Africa. But now I see some people in South Africa, they catch a Nigerian, he's a foreigner, and they burn him. They don't realize that his father's money is what is paying for South Africa's survival. Yeah. So the thing is this, that we should not be so quick to condemn people and not understand. Remember, Africa got independence because many people in Britain were against colonialism. Okay.
In Britain?
In Britain.
On behalf of Africans?
On behalf of Africa. When they saw pictures of British troops torturing Kikuyus and other Kenyans during the Mau Mau revolt.
Dedan
Kimathi's death. People revolted in Britain.
The Bazungu, the whites?
Yes.
On behalf of Africans?
Africans. And they said, no, we don't want this colonialism. Shut this thing down. And that's how Kenya got independence.
Cuba was actually involved here.
All the countries in the world, Russia was involved, China was involved. They took scholarships. The US itself took scholarships. The US, at one point, when the British and the French and the Israelis tried to take the Suez Canal, you remember the Suez crisis? Abdel Nasser blocked the
Abdel Nasser,
he blocked the Suez
Egypt.
Canal. He took a ship and sank it and blocked the canal. And then they started bombing Egypt. When they began bombing Egypt, Russia had just invaded Hungary or Czechoslovakia, I think it was Hungary, 56. And so what happened? Russia, when they realized they were bombing, the British were bombing this, Russia threatened to bomb Paris and London with nuclear weapons. Okay. And these people appealed to the US, said, help us. And I think it was Foster Dulles, the Secretary of State. He said, no. We're not in favor of colonizing Africa. The Americans were on the same side with the Russians at that point. And said, no, pull out. So Britain lost the war within hours. Same thing, France, they pulled out. The government of Britain fell. And shortly after that, they decided to give Africa independence. Uganda was a beneficiary of that. So the Mau Mau War,
1962.
The Mau Mau War is in 54, 55, 56 is the thing that broke Britain. And then Uganda was a beneficiary, we got independence. But you can hear Ugandans say, if a Kenyan comes here without a visa, we have an issue. Well, do you realize that the Mau Mau were Kenyans, the ones you're saying they should not come here without visa?
They fought for your independence.
They fought for your independence and died for your independence. Yeah.
Actually, Cubans here in Africa died, many of them.
Yeah, but remember, Cubans are not foreigners. I think a big percentage of Cubans came from Africa. They were taken there by force as slaves.
Hey, what did you say?
I think the majority of Cubans have African ancestry. Okay.
So they are fighting for their motherland.
You cannot be head of Cuba without respecting African heritage, because you won't have any votes or support in Cuba.
El Commandant Fidel Castro.
Yes, Fidel Castro was was Spaniard, actually from Spain, not even from Latin America. He was an immigrant there, his family.
Hey.
Yes. So are you going to say you don't want Castro, but if he's helping you, but he's European? So.
Ladies and gentlemen.
What I'm saying is that Pan-Africanism is not about the color of people.
Yeah,
it's not about
this.
Yeah,
It's not about color. It's about ideology.
About color. It's about ideology. It's about who is oppressing who and why, and we want to end oppression everywhere. And so, if some people are interfering to help you,
Mahatma Gandhi was fighting for Africa here.
He was a racist before he went to in South Africa. Was a racist. He was pro-white. Then later on, when he went back to India, he switched ideas and became pro-black. Or pro-independence.
Pro-independence.
Yeah, but people change their minds. So are you going to condemn him for the things he did initially, or support him for the things he did later? The thing is that the key thing is that situations change, but we should accept the help of anybody who wants to help us. You cannot say if
it's positive.
If the Chinese government right now is saying we're going to build your highways and infrastructure under terms which are different and better than the ones that we're building for you before, you accept that. And in exchange, we're giving them something also. They have nowhere to put their money. They're going to have inflation until the country falls and collapses. So the economy needs to expand here. The same thing with the US. All the products they're producing cannot be consumed by Americans. Who is going to consume them? Us. If you're making an iPod and you're making 300 million iPods or 500 million iPods.
Per day?
No, per year, let's say, or throughout. There's only 300 million Americans. Only 50% of them are going to buy those things. The rest have to be bought by Ugandans.
Africa.
Yes. And in exchange, they're going to need our oil and our minerals and our brains, our labor.
That's okay, my senior elder. Only that when America wants any of our services or products, it's on their terms. Yet when we want anything from them, it's on their terms. Why don't we also be fair and say...
No. Well, that's the perception.
No. When America wants anything from Africa, they do it at their own peril. When they want to extract Congo's gold and timbers and so on, my brother, they come with the choppers, UN choppers, and they take it. But when you an African goes to America, you are there on their terms.
Really?
Yes. I cannot leave this country and go to America on my terms.
People who haven't been to America think that the person who is heading or was heading the FBI office for the judiciary. These are the people who investigate judges. If judges do crimes or they make messes, the person who arrests them was a Ugandan called Shalita.
Shalita?
One of the Shalita families.
Shalita
was the most powerful person in the justice system in the US. The most powerful person in the Federal Reserve is a black Jamaican. Black person from the Caribbean. Okay. So, and the person who's in charge of the agricultural quota system in Canada, the one who decides that how much food has to be exported out of Canada, is also a Ugandan.
Who is that?
I can't remember his name, but he's a Rwandese Ugandan, and I know his family very well. I've even met his wife, who's Canadian white, but he's an African. I went to stay in Canada for about 20 years. I found him in that position. I left in that position. They changed ministers on his head. He's always in charge, the permanent secretary. He's never changed. The principal secretary there. So the issue for me is that the idea that Africans are victims who do not have agency in negotiating or determining how the world runs is incorrect. Even during slavery, it is not possible to completely exploit and suppress people so that nobody is in charge. Africans were able to become rich even under slavery. Some people. Some.
The kings who were exchanging human beings?
No, not all. No. Even the US, even the slaves who had been taken there. During Reconstruction after slavery, they became very rich people. I think Madame C.J. Walker became the first billionaire woman, I think, or millionaire, whatever, in the US. Female. Black person. So the thing is, what I'm saying is that power, according to the philosopher Foucault, French guy, says power is negotiated from moment to moment. It is not static. So as we talk now, we are negotiating power, either between ourselves or between us and somebody else, or between groups. Our words are intended to empower someone or to disempower another person. Yes.
Disempower some group and empower some group.
Exactly. So whoever watches.
So now we are negotiating power.
We're negotiating power. Whose power? Who's going to determine the future of Africa is being negotiated in this discussion, and it's going to have an impact, because somebody who did not know something is now going to know, and in his knowledge, he's going to change the way he handles things. If he goes to the media and is only complaining because he thinks he's oppressed, and you say, hey, by the way, you're not oppressed, because the people you think are oppressing you don't exist. It's a figment in your mind. There is no American somewhere sitting there trying to figure out how to oppress Africans, and cannot, even if they wanted. Okay, but unfortunately, we have a bunch of people who may be unaware of the situation, or they have a local situation that causes them to say, you know what, let us go dig for cobalt and sell it cheaply to a middleman who will take now this cobalt to a factory in the US, and they're going to use that to make engines for missiles and rockets. But think about it. The number of billionaires who are African now, right, is immense. And they have not shares.
African billionaires.
Yes, and their money is not shares. It's not shares of companies like the way Elon Musk, who's also African incidentally.
He's from South Africa.
Yes. Well, yeah, he says his ancestry is in America, whatever. But the point is this, right? That their wealth in billions is the shares they have in companies and valuations. The African billionaires own actual assets outright to themselves. They're not buying shares of Coca-Cola. They actually own a factory that makes the Coca-Cola directly, because he has a share, a controlling share in how those things are done.
So as we went up Omukama Ndahura the second, what do we mainly take home tonight is that it is not true Africans are oppressed by other groups on the planet Earth, that we are equals on this planet, or it is true, because even slave trade, if we really also have the power either to oppress others or be equal, then why did slavery, happen in Africa? Why haven't we enslaved them?
Because it's not our culture. It doesn't mean that the things that Bazungu did, because of the collapse of their society collapsed and became slaveholders. They became pirates. They became thieves and raiders. Okay, and they became the things they did. They call it capitalism, which is what they call a special type of robber barons, and what they call predatory capitalism. Which is basically theft.
They are predatory.
Yeah, they are predatory.
Yes.
That is just one type of society that has collapsed and come to that. It doesn't mean that a healthy society that refuses to commit
those crimes
is wrong.
Or that it is weak.
It's weak. No. Remember, Haiti under Toussaint Louverture, the guy who got independence for Haiti, he organized 250,000 slaves who spoke different languages, and they defeated the top world powers. 4 of them. They defeated the French, the Spaniards, the English, and the Americans.
French under this man, Napoleon,
yeah.
Bonaparte.
Yes. The scion of his top commanders died in Haiti, fighting Toussaint Louverture. He defeated them. But the thing is this: the Haitians, after they got freedom, went and ended slavery everywhere.
The Haitians?
Yes, they said we don't want slave trade.
Anywhere?
Everywhere. If you catch somebody trading slaves, we're killing you. And they helped the countries of Latin America get independence. Brazil, Argentina, all those countries and every other, Uruguay, Peru, everything in South America was dependent on the Haitians.
Haitians?
Yeah, one island, which was the richest country in the world at that time, briefly.
Haiti was once the richest country in the world.
Yes.
Yet it is very small. It's an island.
It's
a very
an
small
island. Yes.
Hey,
Yes. So
because of sugarcane selling only? Because their main...
no, the history of Haiti is written with a lot of anger and fear. But it wasn't because of sugarcane only. It was because they knew how to handle themselves. They developed a very rich African culture that was militarily capable of doing impossible things. I mean, they built... Have you seen the La Citadelle? The biggest castle in the Western Hemisphere. In Haiti, in the island in Haiti.
No, I have not.
My God, you should check it up. It's a beautiful fort.
Actually, General Barbecue has invited me to go and study the war that they are doing, but also enjoy the Haiti. You know Barbecue?
The warlord.
Yes, General Barbecue. Fighting
Kenyans.
Yes, Kenyans and NATO and America.
Well, I don't believe in war.
You don't believe in war? Yes, that's true. But then when they bring it on your doorstep, what do? Those are Haitians, like you said, and he believes, General Barbecue, that NATO, America, and Kenya, these are hired machineries. They have not gone to Haiti to help Haiti get out of what they are in. No, they are going to steal their resources and bring back colonialism.
Which resources?
Whatever they have. But also remember,
what?
He's talking about recolonize. They want to recolonize.
You know what? Problem with people is we fight for the wrong things sometimes. You know.
Do you think there's nothing to steal from Haiti?
No.
The Americans and NATO?
Look, even
that's why you're saying they have no reason to fight?
No. They have to find peace, and they have to talk to the other Haitians and stop fighting. Nobody would have gone to Haiti, whether NATO or Kenyans or whatever, if they had not been fighting amongst themselves. So you cannot say that Haiti was a perfect situation and nobody was attracted to it. If they were a powerful country that was organized, nobody could land there. So they have failed. And when you fail, you don't dictate anything. You cannot say that these people who are now gangsters, I don't know him personally, obviously, but I'm telling you, when they executed their president, where were they? Why didn't they protect this person? Okay. How does NATO enter a country and kill people? And by the way, do we have influence over NATO? Yes, we can. NATO, one time, tried to get involved in the war in Darfur. And they appointed Mobina Jafar and other people. Mobina Jafar is a Ugandan.
Canadian Ugandan? Yeah,
but she's a senator in Canada.
I know her. She visited me last month.
Okay.
I was with her at Fairway Hotel. She belongs to Sherali Bandali family.
Yes.
That's Fairway family.
Yes. Now, if you could talk to her and ask her about the NATO situation with Darfur, she was one of the people who was saying they should go, that NATO should be allowed to go to Darfur to do peacekeeping. They called a meeting at UBC, University of British Columbia, then changed the venue. I went to the wrong place. I went back and I found they had closed doors. They refused to let us in. Finally, we forced our way in to the microphone, and I told them the history of NATO in Africa, how it was disorderly and disorganized. NATO is not always disorganized, but in the case of Africa, it was. And I said, you cannot send NATO to Sudan. We have the African Union, right? And they said, okay, now you're finished, get off the mic. I said, no, I'm not finished. And I said, I'm one of the few Africans here who's talking about this, and there was several hundred people in the hall. I said, look, we all believe in democracy. Let's ask these people if they want me to continue talking or not.
They asked them?
Yeah, and everybody said, no, let him talk.
Let him continue.
Yeah, and you know what those people did? They got scared of everybody, and they got out and ran through the side door.
You tricked them.
No, I didn't trick them.
We believe in democracy. Let us ask these people.
It wasn't a trick.
And we ask the majority what they want.
If you don't want me to speak, then let's use what you believe in, which is democratic. Let us ask the people here who attended to vote. Should I continue using the mic? Everybody said yes. Please, our hands are up. Continue talking.
And those who are saying continue talking, were they Africans or
no? It's all Canadians of all kinds.
But they were supporting your mission?
Yes, because I explained what the problem with NATO was, and the people who were trying to support NATO, including some of the NATO people who were sitting there, they all ran out through the side door. on the stage.
Where was you? Where were you?
I was, you know, a normal hall. You know, you have a hall and then there's...
Where? Which country?
In Canada.
Which year is this?
Good Lord. This was during the war in Darfur. This was been in the early 2000s. Maybe around 2000.
When you were reporting for that Canadian media?
I was going there as a protester myself, alone.
But then you had also been a media...
I had been a media person, yes, and I was a media person, but I was there not as a reporter, I was there as Kashagama.
As an intellectual?
As an intellectual refusing NATO to go to deploy in Africa as peacekeepers, when we have African Union peacekeepers, and we have UN peacekeepers if those ones fail. Not NATO. NATO is an alliance, it has its mission. It had run out of missions, maybe. And they were now trying to change their mission into something else. Now they have found their mission again by going to Ukraine. But before, they were bumming around without a mission, which is very dangerous for people with guns. You need to be clear what the guns are for. You can't just have guns without a mission.
So finally you failed them to go to Darfur?
No, NATO did not go to Darfur because I protested.
Hey.
Yes, I led a protest against NATO and won. So you cannot tell me that the Haitians are failing this. There are more Haitians in NATO countries, and I was only one person. So am I more than all the Haitians in the world? So what's the problem with them? Ideas are wrong. Tell this general, what's his name? Barbecue, to change his name from barbecue to something less horrifying, and then tell him to call the king so that we can discuss about how to how to calm people down and how to end war. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's always a pleasure. We have actually run out of time.
Yes.
I'm in Kasese. All right, my name is Andrew Rumba Katsabe, your speaker. This is the Pan-African Pyramid.
Support the African Union. Keep it alive.
But if they keep on the agenda,
who is they? Name one person in the African Union who is keeping an
the
agenda.
leaders there.
What are their names? Name one.
Faki.
Who?
Faki.
They should change his name. But I don't. No, that's not his name.
That's his name.
Okay, he's the what? He's the chairman of the African Union Commission.
Yes.
And he's making bad decisions.
And that's why this man from Kenya, this man from Kenya,
Raila
Odinga, is the man he's going to replace.
He wants to be head of the commission.
Yes.
I pity.
Chairman.
Let me explain. Then you go to this person and tell him, you know, your policies are wrong and you need to change them.
Why do you pity the Africans when Raila Odinga is coming in as the chairman?
Because I was a reporter in Kenya.
Hey.
I covered Raila Odinga.
Hey.
He has been running for Kenyan president for the time.
Yes.
I have never had Raila Odinga articulate a vision for African unity. So I don't know about that. And I've met him. And I met his father and I interviewed him also.
His father, Jaramogi?
Yes.
Hey.
I met Jaramogi, Oginga Odinga.
Hey.
Yes.
When you were a reporter, when you were a journalist?
Yes, I met Nyerere. So, you know what? Everybody in Africa thinks they're Pan-Africanist because they feel some kind of patriotism in their heart.
Hey.
It's emotional.
A belonging.
It's emotional.
Hey.
But when you ask them, explain academically or in terms of policy what exactly it is you want to do and how to achieve it, they don't say anything.
So you don't know. So you don't think Raila Odinga is the right person for the right job?
Do you know what the African Union Commission is? It is the secretariat of the Pan-African Parliament. He's going to be a civil servant. He has never been one.
Hey.
No, he has been a politician. I don't know that he knows what things to sign off on. But it's fine. He can go and become that, and if he has good advisors, okay. But if Raila has been the leader of Kenya for a long time, do you compare him in caliber to Lumumba or Kwame Nkrumah? What has he said in that kind of, environment? What has he added to the debate of African unity that you'd think that he's going to become the panacea or the liberator of Africa? I know him because I've met him. I covered him as a reporter. But and maybe he's a good person, he's a whatever, but
when it comes to leadership at the African level.
Yeah. Ruto, on the other hand, Ruto has been talking about Pan-Africanism. He ran up and down, and
but he's doing, when they gave him the mantle, he's doing the opposite, my brother.
Okay, fine. So he's failed in that part. But he spoke things that Raila hasn't spoken,
yes,
which
yes.
were Pan-African.
I agree.
Yeah.
When it comes to speaking,
Uhuru Kenyatta
yes,
was even better than either of the two. Same thing, supported the creation of the East African community. And we sent a delegation of Pan-Africans to him. And he was staying in the home of Ambassador Kirimi Kaberia, who's a Pan-Africanist in Washington. But the thing is, the problem we have is people think they are Pan-Africanists because they have a fellow feeling of Africans. And they think, oh, I can go and do this.
It's a good feeling.
Yes, but I'll tell you something. One of the heads of the African Union, the first one of them, Amara Esi, he was the original guy who Raila is going to replace now. Amara Esi one time went in a meeting in Europe. And he got up and gave a speech complaining that that people were creating things outside of the African Union, including NEPAD. And somebody had to call him off the mic and tell him, sir, NEPAD is an African Union organ. He did not know that, and he was head of the commission. You understand? So
now they did what they've been doing to Salva Kiir when he has been the chair.
Exactly. What I'm saying is that you have the chair of the African Union Commission who doesn't know which organs and agencies and departments are in the African Union Commission, not even just the All African Union thing. You have heads of the African Union Commission who don't realize that they're the secretariat of the Pan-African Parliament, including Alpha Konare before, after Amara Esi, after he left. He didn't know this. And it prompted Miriam Matembe, when she was a member of the Pan-African Parliament, to confront Omar Konare, the former president of Mali, when he was Secretary General when he was chairman. And
Matembe speaks what others fear.
They went and they slammed their shoes on his desk. Hey. To tell him.
She removed the shoes and...
I don't know which one in the team did that, but you ask her. She was there when Alpha Konare was confusing the African Union because he did not know the rules. So you can elect somebody who is competent because he's been a leader.
In Kenya.
But
now we want a leader of Africa.
Of Africa who doesn't know how Africa needs to work, doesn't know which parts are working, which ones aren't working, and is going to go there and say some things for 5 years and then go. Nothing's going to change. Thabo Mbeki had the same problem. He was talking about, you know what, he's going to support the African Union. Okay? But you know what he did? He went and moved the capital of the parliament from Addis. Concocted a bill for the members of the Assembly of Heads of State to sign. And they signed off on him taking the thing to Midrand. Do you know where Midrand is? Nobody does.
Hey.
It's some little town between Pretoria and Johannesburg.
In South Africa?
Yes, a no-name town. And that's where the Pan-African Parliament is sitting, in something called the Gallagher Estate.
From
Addis.
From Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Addis, the capital of Africa, where everybody knows where you want something about Pan-Africa, go there. So now, the parliament...
So now they took it to South Africa?
Mbeki, he told them that he was going to give $60 million to support the African Parliament, which he didn't do. But he moved the Pan-African Parliament from Addis Ababa.
From Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
And then the Union Act says that the AU Commission is the secretariat of the Parliament.
Pan-African Parliament?
Yes, now the Parliament
which is in Addis
is 6,000 miles from the secretariat.
The Parliament is in Addis Ababa?
Yes, and
the secretariat is in South Africa?
No, the Parliament is South Africa. The secretariat, the clerk of Parliament, the one who's supposed to be helping, is in Addis. You can see, and then you say the African Union is not working. Yes, why is it not working? Because at the same time that Mbeki was doing that, he was supplying peacekeepers to the Congo to end the Congo War in the late 1980s, 2000s. When he was sending peacekeepers, he was also selling helicopters. Selling helicopters to Rwanda, which was in that war, and selling guns and anti-aircraft to the guys in the Congo who were firing at the Rwandese.
You're talking about Thabo Mbeki or...
Thabo Mbeki.
Or Putin?
Thabo Mbeki.
Selling...
He was doing peacekeeping in the Congo and selling weapons to all sides which were fighting each other.
Thabo Mbeki?
Thabo
Not
Mbeki.
the Putin of Russia?
No. Thabo Mbeki.
But he's supposed to be a brother. So when you're arming both sides, what are you doing?
Do you know, South Africa is the biggest supplier of electronics for the US Army. Not China, not Japan, not the US, South Africa.
Is the biggest what? Supplier
of electronics, hardened ones that can stand impacts. The top technology they're using in the US is coming from Africa. For NATO.
From South Africa?
Yes. They have the biggest uniform and combat supply for the whole world.
Here, South Africa?
South Africa. Not to mention all of the special minerals that they need. Like, for instance, Uganda has cobalt. You know what cobalt is used for? For making engines of rockets heat resistant. So, you send the cobalt there, they make a nice engine which can fly for 3,000 miles without melting because of the heat. And this missile will come and hit you. And then you say, NATO has hit us.
Yet you are the one who supplied.
You are the one who supplied them the engines. So, whose fault is that now? NATO.
So, we are manufacturing our own.
We are the ones who are bombing ourselves using NATO and saying NATO is hitting us. There is nothing that the West can produce right now in terms of armaments without African minerals. They cannot produce even one computer, not even one cell phone, not one GPS machine, not one satellite in the sky, nothing. And then you're complaining that it is them, and they have put conditions on you. Which one?
Yeah, but when I'm selling to them those materials, do I have the capacity to dictate what where they are going to manufacture and where the manufactured goods will go?
Yes.
Are you sure? Are you sure?
Yes.
That when I sell to them my trouser, I will dictate when they should put it on and where they should go after putting it on.
Why do you have to sell it in the first place? Why don't you keep it on? You wear it.
Up to when? I keep it for who?
You know, in the Bible, there's a guy called Esau. His younger brother said, you give me your first right as a firstborn. And the guy said, no, I am the firstborn. I have to remain firstborn. So one day, Esau comes home, and Jacob tells me, I want to be the firstborn. And this guy says nonsense. The third time he comes, and he needs porridge to drink because he's hungry. And the guy says, I will not give you porridge. I have the porridge here. You give me your right as firstborn. And the guy said, whatever. It's the same thing. Do I need it? He gave the guy the right as firstborn. And the guy gave him porridge. He sold his birthright for porridge. So, whose fault is it, Jacob or Esau? So what I'm trying to tell you is this. Don't say that somebody in Europe has come to dig cobalt from Kasese. Nobody does that. The cobalt is here.
But they're stealing it. The Americans, the whites.
How many whites have you seen in Kilembe stealing cobalt?
And they are using you black people.
Who I am not one of the black people who is selling cobalt.
Yeah, you may not be you, but when you go there, after digging that cobalt, where does it end?
That's the problem now. You cannot continue blaming white people for buying cobalt because everybody wants to buy cobalt. The question is, Uganda produces war drones now. We produce vehicles.
War drones?
Yes.
Uganda?
Yes. Uganda's army, UPDF, it can be self-sufficient in terms of technological development. They don't need to buy from outside. You know,
they are manufacturing their own war drones?
Yes.
Where?
Uganda does. Good Lord. Uganda is one of the most technologically developed countries in Africa and in the world right now.
Uganda, yeah.
The reporters here are so confused about what they should report about. They never ask for those things. Look, Ugandans who have studied abroad, who know how things work, are living here. They come back and they do these things. The US has the H1 visa. The H1 is it the H1B to try and get intellectual people who are qualified. So Ugandans, they teach you teach people here from P1 to
P7
to Makerere.
Then P7 senior 4. Yes. Then A level senior 5 and 6. Then Makerere University.
Then this person works here for 3-4 years, then he's taken to the US.
But I know about technology also.
So you are saying Sudan has the...
Sudan had the tank city, the biggest producer at one time of tanks in the world.
Sudan?
Sudan.
Manufactured by Sudanese
Manufactured
or
in Sudan.
Chinese and Americans and Russians in Sudan?
Sudanese.
They have the brains to manufacture that?
Good Lord. Good Lord. The top agronomist in the world, I knew him, Fadil al-Fadil. He was a Sudanese. I met him in Canada. He was the president of the university in India before he went to Canada. What do you mean? The Africans have brains backwards and forwards, man. We are no longer behind. Africans are so far ahead in so many things. For instance, let me give you an example. East Africa has the most advanced cell phone technology in the world.
Cell phone?
Cell phone technology.
East Africa?
Yes.
But we are importing.
No, we're importing, but not importing the apps.
All the phones we are using in East Africa are coming from China.
Yes, but the technology inside and how it is being used is more advanced here. I'll give you an example. We have mobile money and mobile banking. The US tried to launch mobile money and it collapsed after 3 days.
Mobile money system, like your MTN here and Airtel.
Yes, they don't have it.
So that technology was locally...
yes. Even if whoever developed it in the world, they cannot execute in the US because of the way the infrastructure there is located. The way it is. And the investments they have put in. It failed. It has failed. The top cell phone company in the world at one time was an Egyptian company.
Egypt.
And they went to North America and the North Americans refused. They used all tricks to try and stop them. Until finally these guys got in. They had to buy shares on others and change the name. But the Egyptians had the Africans had the top tier cell phones in North America. Yeah.
You said America, South Africa is selling what to America?
The so-called crocodile APC, the ones that can withstand landmines.
APCs?
Armored personnel carriers. They look like tanks. They carry 12.
It is South Africa manufacturing and selling to America?
No, they copy the technology from South Africa.
The Americans?
Yes.
Copied from South Africa?
Yes. But they acknowledge that.
But then South Africa is having a population of white people. Maybe those are the ones who manufactured.
Okay, whatever. You can say that, but when the people were doing this, the Bazungu, when they were leaving, they removed everything that was militarily of advantage to the black government that was coming to power. They uprooted stuff, took nuts, anything they could not carry, they would put a spanner inside the works and blow it up. Yes. So what happened? When Mandela took over, there was no functioning industry or anything in South Africa. Nothing. Do you know how it was solved? The African Development Bank rushed into South Africa and put money to repair things quickly. And they took all the military companies in South Africa and put them under one corporation called the NEL. The board of the NEL is all Pan-African ANC guys. And
African National Congress?
Yes, these are
ANC.
Former freedom fighters. All of them were the ones who were sitting on the NEL. And yet, Mbeki was able to run around them and make sure he supplied weapons to 3 sides. People were fighting and the peacekeepers.
Thabo Mbeki?
Yes, in the Congo. That war in the Congo continued forever because of Mbeki's failure or greed.
Or because he was benefiting.
I don't know. Anyway,
it is not failure, but he was. If you say he was supplying, then he didn't want the war to end.
He was removed from the presidency because of that scandal. Weapons, guns. He was becoming a gun dealer.
Gangster,
yeah. So we have a problem. Mbeki, he's talking now that recently he gave a speech. You know that during Mbeki's time, that's when they began necklacing foreigners, saying that foreigners should go, other Africans should get out of South Africa. You remember they said killing Africa?
Zimbabwean and so on.
They killed Zimbabweans, Nigerians, everybody was being chased. Under Mbeki. Now Mbeki is claiming that white people are the ones who are instigating that. And he says that he had a security intelligence report to that effect. but he never acted in time, and he says, I regret, but he's lying, because for the first thing is that he's the one who came up with the theory of South African exceptionalism, that South Africans were somehow better than other Africans. You understand? And that produced that tempered argument, which made all South Africans start believing that other Africans were coming to
take away from them.
Yeah.
They were coming to steal them.
Yeah.
They were not bringing any additional development, but coming to take away.
It has caused Malema, who falls on the side of the Africans, say, no, this is wrong. We cannot be chasing other Africans. But Malema is only now discovering his Pan-Africanism, because he's saying things that you can see are somewhat, in some cases, childish, but he's beginning to understand the value of the African Union. Things he was against white domination, but he wasn't a Pan-Africanist. It's a difference. It's the same thing with Raila Odinga and the rest of them. They talk about Pan-Africanism from a sentimental point of view, but they don't have the technical, political, policy know-how of how a Pan-African government works. You say you support
actualizing their words.
You say Pan-Africanism works, but you don't have an African Union office there. You have never put money in the African Union. You have never attended a Pan-African Parliament session. You have never written a paper supporting any policy on unifying Africa, but you want to be the leader of a Pan-African state, of a unified Africa.
Under which policy?
Exactly.
Which white paper? Yeah. Which blue copy?
Exactly. Where is
Raila Odinga should be having a blueprint.
Does he know how the customs unions all across Africa work, especially the customs agencies? And does he know how he's going to fix them? What policy is going to put in place to say, you know what, we need to have open borders? What is the procedure to accomplish that? Okay. Do you have visas? Do you abolish them? Do you do what? Okay. This is the problem. To give somebody power because he feels he's Pan-African. He feels it, but he doesn't know what to do
with it.
Yes. And he cannot execute because he hasn't got a plan. And if he had a plan, he could have told us, you know what? Kwame Nkrumah had a plan. He even wrote a book. And he said why we need to unite. Okay? We now have internet. And people can publish even better than they could those days. In the 60s, publishing was a big complicated thing. You had no printing press in Africa. Where are the statements of unifying Africa?
By Raila Odinga?
By anybody, yeah. You know, I'll give you another example. Thabo Mbeki, while he was head of state, came up with a thing of African Renaissance. This is what I'm calling confusion. He's supplying a war in one thing, supplying peacekeepers, and at the same time, he's
supplying guns.
He's supplying guns, and at the same time, he's talking about African Renaissance. Then the African Renaissance, he came up with an idea, we should have a Marshall Plan, like the one that was done for Germany and Japan by the Americans after the Second World War. So he goes to the summit, the G8 summit, they invite him. Before they invite him, he gives this thing. Now, the person who was chosen to organize the G7 meeting in a place called Kananaskis in Canada was a guy called Fowler, Ambassador Fowler. I think he was Robert Fowler, I can't remember his first name. But Fowler had to do, what they call sensitization, public meetings, to prepare people in Canada for this. So one of the public meetings, I went to this place, and we were in a room where there weren't many of us. It was about maybe 20 people. And we had a discussion with him. And I asked him, I said, you're saying that Thabo Mbeki has asked for $64 billion to fund the African Renaissance. How is that going to work? You know, what channels is the money going to go? Who's going to get paid? Which secretariat? To effect what? In order for that money to come out as a useful resource to Africa. Yes. Where's the money going to go? Are you going to give Mbeki 64 billion? Then I said, okay, fine. Where is the money coming from? Because I know the money that America uses for aid is coming from the Teachers' Pension Fund. Even in Canada, it's the same thing. In fact, all European countries, they have the equivalent of NSSF. And the NSSF monies are the ones they used to do international aid. Because these pension funds are massive. You can imagine all the civil servants in Uganda have a portion of their money stuck in that
in the accounts of the NSSF. I think NSF is bigger than most banks in Uganda, if not all of them. Maybe it's bigger than all of them combined. But he was explaining that if he had known the problems he would face before he built, he would not have attempted it.
Aliko Dangote,
Yes.
he's regretting.
No, he succeeded, but he said his hair turned grey
Yes.
because of the exercise.
So if he had known,
the amount of danger and problems he'd put himself in, he would not have risked. But now, Nigeria has an oil refinery of its own with high-grade fuel. And the other millionaires in his country, the President Tinubu, owns refineries outside of
Nigeria,
outside
of Africa.
Yeah, they're rich guys.
Tinubu has a refinery outside of Africa.
Tinubu, his family is very rich. There's been a bit of a complaint about that in Nigeria. But the issue is, for me, Africans have money now. Not only that, they have means, they know how to do things. The problem is they have been focused on making money, not on building African unity. But African unity is not a joke. It's not a football game. It's not a joke. You need to actually sit down and figure out the technical issues involved in unifying Africa. If you don't do that, it's not going to happen. And so, for me, I see people speaking flippantly about
flippantly.
Yeah, without
they are flip-flopping.
Yeah, without understanding what people are talking about. You say this person wants to be the head of the African Union Commission. What does he know? See, somebody says, "Oh, I want to be a member of the Pan-African Parliament or the East African Community Parliament," but he has never discussed anything to do with Africans in East Africa, what they need to do to get ahead. Doesn't know. And he's not going to go to the parliament and table a bill because he doesn't know how to table a bill. But if he tabled a bill, what would it say? You see? But he still wants to be in the parliament. And he still wants to be head of the African Union Commission. And he still wants to be the head of the Pan-African Parliament. And he still wants to be in the Assembly of Heads of State and Government. And the problem is, to do what? To what end? Yeah. You're going to learn when you get there.
We learn on job.
You learn on the job. We're not antelopes in the bush. Like one is born and they say, "Run, lion's coming." But it's a problem. You cannot manage things like that. You have to have a plan before you execute. And then where's the cadres that are going to help you to take these things forward? Yeah. I remember one time I explained to when Gertrude Mongela she was the first president of the Pan-African Parliament. And I called her and her team and I explained and I said, you know what? You need to open an African Development Bank abroad, a branch of the IDB in Canada, another place in North America, because African banks are failing there. And for the simple reason that, for instance, I gave them an example that in British Columbia, there's about 50,000 black people, Africans, and they all bank with the banks that they found in Canada. But if you had an African bank,
they would bank there.
They would bank there, and you could use fractional reserve banking to then make grants for projects in Africa. And the bank deposits in Canada would be insured by the Canadian financial system, not by Uganda or whatever. And the Canadian system has its own strength. And I went to the Canadian CIDA, the top guys in the Canadian Development Agency, and I gave them the plan. And we're like, this is a good way. Instead of giving aid, we can just support an African bank by insuring just all. And you could send more money. And instead of sending $20 to your mama and $20 to your sister, you can bank the $40, okay? And the bank would be able to lend out or create grants that were much bigger than your $40, even without you sending the money to Africa. That money would be used as a leverage to build roads and infrastructure in Africa. So you'd kill two birds with one stone. You could send the money to your grandmother, but before it goes there, it already is funding government. And the Canadian government would not have to now send aid money. You understand? That obligation would be reduced for them. They could use that money for something else.
All right. My name is Andrew Rumba Katsabe, your speaker. This is the Pan-African Pyramid.
Support the African Union.